already showed you with Secretary Rumsfeld at his desk, what you couldn't notice because it's just too small to notice. One day I turned to him and I said, you know, Secretary Rumsfeld, the stripes are worn off your pants. Yes, striped suits. And the stripes had worn off. He could afford a new suit. He claimed he bought all his suits at Sears when there was a Sears. And that might be true. He was somewhat frugal in many ways. He got angry. He said, no, they're still there. I said, well, yeah, parts of them are there, but you're in front of the public every day. You can't go out there in your pinstripe suit without the pinstripes. And people notice. He did not take kindly to that, but that's where you just got to bug him from time to time to keep him on point. So, congratulations to all the fellows, the new fellows. Is that this table? Yeah. Okay, congratulations. Thank you, Tori, for last night. Sarah, Evelyn, thank you so much for making sure I got here on time with the right stuff. All that, I appreciate it, so thank you. Bob, good to see you again. We've done a lot of work together, as Steve and some others in this room. And amazing tales. And some good work, actually. And probably some that we'd like to do over here. Do the best we can. Public service. You know, I think the way we conduct public service in the United States of America is what makes this country great. And public service, you know, can start fairly low down in city councils and that sort of thing, school boards, people that serve for no remuneration but do great service for the country. And then it gets to your level where you're now at the national level and your service is important, maybe even more important. But that sense of public service, if we ever lose that, if the career folks that work in our institutions in this town, if they ever stop coming, we're in dire straits. And that's the apolitical base that's so important to govern this country. There's the political appointees, of course, and they're important as well. Some, like Secretary Rumsfeld, I thought, pulled that off very well, because in those days it was traditional that the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense did not participate in politics. So they didn't go to rallies, they didn't go to speeches that were political in nature. They were above that because their portfolios should be above politics. A little different today, I know, but that was the day. Secretary Rumsfeld carried that off very well. Very seldom did. I don't ever remember politics coming into our discussion. Political issues might, if they hampered our assumptions or our ability to do our job, but not just pure raw politics. The closer you got to the White House, the more of that was prevalent, of course, as it should be. So I thank you for your willingness to serve the public in these, what I call vital positions. And it's tough right now. I know it's tough. But it's essential. It's essential to this country. I'll talk just a little bit about that as we talk about some remarks I have here for you. So, I'd like to talk to you about strategic leadership. And there's several levels of leadership, but you may not be a strategic leader the way I think about it at this moment, or you may be, but you're going to be soon. So, and these sort of things I'll talk about, I think apply at all levels, but particularly for senior leaders. And I'll go through 6 items and talk about them. I'll sprinkle a few Rumsfeld-isms in there when it's appropriate, because he did it about right. So the first thing I'd like to talk about, if you're a strategic leader, you know, the problems you confront in your inbox are tough. Tough decisions have to be made. And they're in your inbox because you're kind of at the top up here. If they were easy, they'd have been solved probably before they got to you. But now you got them. And you've got to figure out how to do it. So the first thing I would encourage you to think about is intellectual openness. And it's hard. We're all human. We like to think we know things. And when you go to meetings, doubt it applies to any of you. You can always tell the one who thinks he's the smartest one in the room when you're walking in. And usually least effective in getting things done. Okay, so to the smartest one in the room, just bite your tongue, and when it's time to speak, say something important, and this we can execute, and you'll be liked for that. Secretary Rumsfeld really took this openness to heart. He had every problem he liked to look at from 360 degrees. That takes a lot of intellectual energy. He had more than anybody in the Pentagon. Wouldn't you agree, Steve? And it was 24/7. I wore out by 5 or 6 o'clock at night. Okay, I'm done. What can I get here? He calls and no, we got to have a meeting, or later, or Saturdays. The story is about anthrax. So the anthrax vaccine was being given to all our troops after 9/11. The anthrax factory in Michigan, I think it was, failed. It had to be redone and repurposed. And then they came back online. Anybody have the anthrax series in here? 7 shots. It used to be 7 shots. Maybe it still is. And there was a lot of grumbling in the ranks in particular, and particularly in the reserve components about being forced to have the vaccine. But the intel said we're likely to get attacked with that. That's the one thing that they have that they can dispense pretty easily. And so for keep our military healthy, he called in a Nobel Prize-winning virologist. Not just any virologist, a Nobel Prize-winning virologist came in, and we all sat around the table, and the bottom line was anthrax is safe and it's effective. Been used for years, the vaccine. I thought that would settle. The Joint Chiefs of Staff already put our vote in saying we have to vaccinate the troops. Well, it took about, I forget how long, but over a month later before Secretary Rumsfeld came to the same conclusion. For him to develop conviction, he had to think about it for a long time. He didn't come to the party with a lot of convictions. He had to be convinced in his own mind by people at the table. And he wanted advice from anybody. If you're sitting around the table with him, how often would he say, if you're here because you know something, so speak up. If you're going to sit on a rock, go back to your office. So he was terrific in encouraging this openness. Now, you might say something where he'd say, well, I have to recalibrate you. And I have a lot of that. Yeah, I'll recalibrate you. But you had to speak up. So this intellectual openness means to accept a lot of ideas for what are the most complex problems in the world. And that's what you deal with at your level now, and the strategic level, when you're advising people above you, when you're in those meetings. Think about openness and how you encourage everyone to participate in input. You may not like them. They may make you mad. Take them on board anyway. And you may find that one of the ones that made you mad might be exactly what you're looking for. If you get over your ego and get on with it. The second one after intellectual openness is nuance. Really good strategic leaders understand nuance. Every problem has great complexity and ambiguity at the strategic level. You've got to figure out how to deal with what's probably going to be cognitive dissonance as you think about this. You've got to reject an either-or solution. You've got to be ready to understand these problems in such detail that you're and the realization that maybe your current doctrine or your tactics, techniques, procedures, or what you learned in school or what your professor told you is the Bible for whatever discipline you're in may not be enough. So you have to have that understanding that this can happen. You can't just ignore it. You've got to deal with it. And one of the ways to deal with it is the third point, which is intellectual agility. So let me talk about nuance just for a second. So when I was a wing commander, I had a vice wing commander that saw everything. He did not understand nuance. Everything was black or white. So the 4-star on base that we lived on wanted some trees planted around the dental clinic. My vice commander comes to me one day. He's so depressed. He said, what's the matter, Boomer? And he says, well, the 4-star wants these planted here, but no, they really need to go here. I said, really? You're going to pick a fight with the 4-star based on where the trees are planted? Well, yeah, that makes sense. I said, I understand. Maybe it's better in your mind. But he did not understand the entirety of that problem. And you just plant them, and, you know, if you don't like them, have the dogs pee on them, they'll die, you plant more. There are a lot of ways to deal with these things. Intellectual agility. Yeah, we all have our doctrine. We all have the things we've learned in school and all the great schools you all go to and so forth. But, you know, sometimes they're not up to the problems of the day. And so you can't be slaves to that doctrine, those ideas that you were taught, which may be perfect for whatever the context was at the time, but not be when the situation dictates something different. And the example I like to use is getting ready to go into Afghanistan. Leading up to that, we had a simple command to come in and give us their plans for defeating Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, probably along the way taking on the Taliban. And how would we do that? And what do you think we got, the first couple of versions of that? We got these heavy, we got to take 16,000 troops, and we got to secure airfields, and I mean, it couldn't happen. So what came out of that was some SOF 18s with airmen assigned that talked to the close air support aircraft, the B-2s, B-1s, B-2s, B-52s. They were up there 25 to 30,000 feet. And when they finally made it over the Hindu Kush in the winter and got established, we went in there on October 7th before Thanksgiving. Al-Qaeda was on the run to the hills, Taliban folded, and the other important part of that was giving bags of money to the warlords. So that wasn't any doctrine that was written anywhere, I don't think. That was how it was worked out as we thought about it, and that was the plan we came up with. One of the big decisions for people in the third floor of the Pentagon was, in the Secretary's office, is the CIA in charge of this or is guilty? And it was quickly resolved. The CIA had the best relationships in the country with the called in the Northern Alliance. And a lot of those people were on the payroll already. So we had to add more. And they knew how to give money to people. CIA does that pretty well. I'm not going to tell them. But to encourage loyalty. But there's I think, an example of where intellectual agility played a pretty important role. Okay, so the fourth one is integration. And so, you know, strategic leaders have to understand where they are in the instance of national power. Of course, depending on it's the military, but it could be the state, it could be diplomatic, it could be economic. We use commerce in Iraq, commerce, that was totally economic. Senior leaders are responsible not only on their own capability, but how do we integrate that with everybody else? And it's one of my failings as chairman was to get the White House to appreciate how, if we're going to go into Afghanistan and then Iraq, and we have these very ambitious goals. They weren't the ones we went in with. They resulted from flags of governments and we say, oh, what do we do now? Sort of things. All instruments of national power had to play. And I would argue that that was marginally true. But really it was the military that was asked to do so many things. Somebody should have been doing it. We should have had State Department folks helping folks in Iraq, in the northern Iraqi area, to develop town councils and some form of government stuff there. I met an artilleryman, 2 strikes. And I said, what do you do up there? And Mosul says, well, I'm an artilleryman normally, but I'm helping set up a town council structure. I said, well, what do you know about doing that? He said, I remember my civics from high school. I'm ready to go. So, I mean, that's where we asked him to do, and he was going to do it. And there were a lot of she's doing it. It was just really, really hard work. But that integration, I don't think we ever got to that point. And I'll talk to you a little bit about later when I talk about some of the Secretary Rumsfeld's characteristics. And then fifth, the seniors must be masters of teamwork too. And it's teamwork within your own team, and it's integrating your team with the other teams. Not done real well in the interagency. How many of you work in the interagency? How do you think the teamwork between? There are some great silos and great egos. Secretary Rumsfeld, we were asked to go to Congress fairly often to brief either Afghanistan or Iraq. And we'd go to the House and Senate, they'd be classified hearings. They always invited the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State. Appropriate, you think. Secretary Powell never went. Always somebody at the lower level, which left Secretary Rumsfeld as the front man, which he actually didn't mind, but it didn't give, I don't think it gave our Congress a balanced sense of how people felt about things or solutions to things. And that was allowed to go on as long as I was chairman. It was just people kind of ducking and not being part of the team. And we can talk more about that in Q&A if you want to. So in building a team inside the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I don't know, when did Doug Feist get confirmed? It seemed like it was May or June or something.
Who is about that? Yeah.
So he's the Undersecretary for Policy, number 3, ranking individual in the Department of Defense, and somebody that the Joint Chiefs need to work very closely with because they're going to go be at the table when the secretaries come up here and use options. There'll always be USDP there, and there'll always be the chairman there, the vice chairman or both, at the table. And you don't want to go in there and have your fist fights out in the open. You'd like to get at least know where you stand when you go in front of the secretary. So I said at the staff meeting, I said, does anybody know this fellow named Doug Feist? And nobody raised a hand. I said, okay, Colonel Pace, your job is to make him your new best friend. And so the good Marine, Colonel Pace, went off and made him his new best friend. And what it guaranteed in building this teamwork is that we pretty well understood each other, and where we had differences, we understood that. We tried to work through those if we could, and we often did. But it's all about relationships. And, you're trying to build a team. You got to build relationships, and you got to have great integrity. You got to be trustworthy. You got to be trusting for these relationships to flourish. And we worked really hard at that with our civilian counterparts in the building. And Steve can tell you more about that offline if he wishes. But it ain't easy. It's really, really important that you do it. Okay, the sixth one is ethics. So, just because we're working for the U.S. government and somebody comes up with a bright idea doesn't mean it's an ethical idea necessarily. Sometimes you have these great ends that you want to achieve, and they're glorious ends, they're righteous. The means to get there can be less than righteous. And you need to take time to recalibrate your true north, personally and then as a team. Otherwise, you can be going down a path and it could be way too late before you figure out, oh my goodness, I think we just are breaking the law here, or this is not in concert with U.S. culture or whatever. My story was I was overseas when I got a notice from Secretary Rumsfeld, a memo to all the staff, that the President has just decided that the Geneva Conventions will not apply to our fight with in Afghanistan. I said, wow, I don't remember being in that meeting. Well, it wasn't a meeting, it was a Saturday meeting when the lawyers, that's what they always got for the President, his White House counsel, Attorney General, they swooped down on him Saturday. He's unarmed, he's afraid, he's signing this. And And then it was edict. So when I got back to the trip, I went up to see Secretary Rumsfeld. I said, the first call to Pace, I said, did you agree to this? Because if you did, that's fine. He thought it through. Wouldn't be where I'd go, but that's okay. He said, no, we didn't have a meeting. I went to Secretary Rumsfeld. I said, do you have a meeting with just some principals, Dr. Rice, State on this? No, we never had a meeting. He said, you know, the U.S. Armed Forces is brought up on the Geneva Convention. That's one of the things that we have to learn, taught, and salute. So this is really anti-cultural to our military. He immediately called Dr. Rice. He said, you're right, we need to have a meeting on this. We know a decision to be made. So we went to the Situation Room. Secretary Rumsfeld did not develop conviction on this one, so he didn't say much. Doug Fives had great conviction. He was where the Joint Chiefs were, that he should have flied. And President Bush leaned back and he asked Attorney General Ashcroft, well, what do you think about Iraq? If we decided to go into Iraq, because the logic was Afghanistan's a failed state, even though they're a signatory to the Geneva Convention, they're a failed state, so it doesn't apply. And they said, yeah, that's right. So what about Iraq? Did you call them a failed state? And they nodded. The Geneva Conventions apply, and they took their heads together and said, no, they wouldn't. Just like Afghanistan, they would not apply. And the president said, gotcha, you're just doing this whimsically. You don't have any logic here. And that's, so he backed off on that a little bit. Certainly did apply in Iraq because they were wearing uniforms and things. It's tougher when you have an enemy that's not compliant with the Geneva Conventions, uniforms, rank, and all that sort of stuff. But they still can apply. You can still apply it and treat them as if, just to encourage their better behavior. I know that terrorist organizations, that's often a fool's errand, but it's part of our culture and we should do it. So all I'm saying is, I had time when I was overseas to think about this, a long plane ride home, and I said, this doesn't sound right. And with some advice from the SJA and General Pace and others, we got an idea where we wanted to go. And Secretary Rumsfeld was very helpful in doing that. So those were the 6 issues around strategic leadership, or 6 points that a colleague and I developed at NDU when we were there a while back. And we thought about what's the difference between really good strategic leadership and also rounds. One of the things that I was encouraged to talk about is what's around the corner. And that seems to change every day in terms of threats to this country, what's around the corner. There's a good book out done by Tom Shanker, formerly of the New York Times, and I think he's with George Washington. He's still involved in the business, but more as a professor and so forth. And Andy Hohen, who was on staff at OSD, has been with Rand for a long time. And they wrote this book, and it's called Age of Danger. And it's been out for about a year and a half or so. Talks about new superpowers. It talks about new weapons. It goes into an area that I got very involved with at K-State, and that's bioagri-security. If you want to scare yourself some night before you go to bed, read the book. It's very relevant. It's relevant today. It tries to peek around the corner just a little bit. And on bioagri-security, a colleague of mine just testified on the Hill last week on this issue, as I did a couple years before out at K-State. Because K-State, on our campus, we have the National Bioagri Defense Facility. Anybody know what that is? That replaced Plum Island. That's where all the worst animal and plant diseases are studied and tested, and vaccines are tested. So it's, if you can imagine a $2 billion building, that's what it is. It's away from on campus. People worry about these bad pathogens escaping. And you tell them, well, you can take a school bus and you can hurl it at the side of the building in the windows at 200 miles an hour and nothing's going to happen. So it's pretty sturdy. You can take a herd in there and do your testing, and they check in, but they don't check out. And it's all in the building, it's all in the, I mean, they eventually just go down the drain to the city sewer. this is this. Well, if you were a determined biological terrorist, and you wanted to cause foot-and-mouth disease, one of the most virulent, you have to destroy any animal with it. And unfortunately, we're afraid of that in the United States, but because overseas, you go to an infected steer or something, you take your handkerchief out, you wipe it across the nostrils, you put that in your back pocket. You take your time getting home, it's going to stay live for 7 days in your back pocket. And you come home, and then you go up to some feedlots, which are not protected in the United States, but feedlots, you start wiping a few noses, and then it spreads, and pretty soon you have economic disaster, if not caloric disaster. Or wheat rust, which is a fungus that spreads to the wind. And again, we don't have that in the United States, but it's overseas. So you could take some wheat rust, you could put it on a windy day, and it can destroy crops. Those are the kind of things that haven't happened. They talk about it in the book. They talk to me, and I talk about that. Because people just don't, there's a lot of things like that in the book that we aren't thinking about. CIA long ago stopped, 2014 stopped, doing intel on biological threats. So it's left to whoever cares. And not a good thing. So that's The Age of Danger. Look it up. Tom Shanker and Andy Cohen are really, really good men. And they spent a lot of time on this book, and I think it'll help you as you think through the problems. Okay, so as we finish up here, some Rumsfeld-isms. He was never afraid to speak truth to power. I remember, and Steve will remember because you were part of it. Bob, I don't remember if you were part of this particular trial. Before President Bush made the decision to go into Iraq, Secretary Rumsfeld asked us to sit down and write down what could go right if we do that and what could go wrong if we do that. And we gave him about 40 things. So we go to a meeting, the Situation Room, and President Bush is still trying to gather information on whether we should do this or not do this. And as the meeting get ready to conclude, Secretary Rumsfeld says, Mr. President, I have some things put together. We'll talk about the good and bad that can happen if you make a decision to go ahead to Iraq. He says, I know. You may know, but let me go through these 40 points. He just said, we're going to go through them. And he did, one by one. And I think if I were the president, that'd be very helpful, because nobody else on the staff's doing that. That's how his mind works. I don't think he had conviction necessarily about what we should do or not. That was the president's choice. But he wanted the president to know what could go right, what would be a good outcome, and what could be a very bad outcome. Most of those came true. He always held himself accountable. He didn't try to blame others for things going wrong. The one that I remember most vividly is Abu Ghraib. Anybody remember that at all? The Iraqi prisoners that were in the prison in Iraq and they weren't tortured, but they were certainly abused and humiliated by a bunch of military police that were not up to the task of doing that kind of job. And only a couple of really bad actors, but it got way out of hand. And so when the pictures finally made the headlines, the president calls Rumsfeld and said, "We fire Myers." And he said, "No, that was the first time that we fired Myers." No, we should not. He said, I offer to resign. Now there's a public servant that's willing to stand up for in digress just a minute. He had tremendous respect for those in the fight, for those doing their job. The Teddy Roosevelt quote, "It's not the critic who counts," blah, blah, blah. He gave me that on a bronze plaque. And that's how he looked at the folks that were doing our big overseas. And he was slow to take action for people that were doing the best. He didn't resign, as you know, and we finally got it sort of sorted out, but that became sort of a thorn for over a year, and a political thorn as well as different sides of it. He also knew his role in life. And we took down Omar's compound near Kandahar, the first thing we did in Afghanistan. And this was to show resolve. This was to show the U.S. is more than cruise missiles, which was the last strike we did in Afghanistan. And the Clinton administration, this is more than that. 9/11 is so serious, we're going to dedicate our blood and treasure to this effort. And so we flew in, we took the compound down. It was empty, and we knew that, but we thought there might be some leave-behinds we could look at. It was all coming back to the Pentagon in terms of pictures from the drones. We could see everything happening. We could see the 47s landing, the dust building up. We could see the charges going against the doors. We could see people running about. We could hear the comms. And some of the staff got really excited and said, Secretary Rumsfeld, you need this capability in this office. You need to be able to watch things from here, maybe even control things from here. He says, no, that's Tommy Frank's job, or that's the commander on the ground job. That's not my job. I work different problems. You know, lesser folks that hadn't thought it through say, oh yeah, I can do that. But that was just going to get back to Vietnam days where you make all those decisions. He had a pretty developed sense of humor. Sometimes you had to peel the bark away through that too. But you could use it to diffuse a tense situation. And sometimes you could do some self-deprecating humor and laugh at Myers. One time we took the Army guy working all our deployment orders up there in full battle rifle and a helmet. And he was, what's this about? So you've been brutal on our briefers. My job is to protect my men. And of course he laughs. That was one of the better names.
That's amazing.
And then just to kind of tweak him, which is a dangerous thing to think about doing, but to tweak him just a little bit. Every time I introduced him to an audience inside the Pentagon for sure was, and now the Secretary of Defense has served in the position in 2 different centuries. And they did not like that. So if I didn't like it, I'd say it even more. But he would smile because he knew, it was. So there's some thoughts on strategic issues on a book that I think would benefit you and read it because these are 2 smart guys that did a lot of research